Hey Brian, man, thanks for taking a little bit of time to talk to my students and the internet. About you graduating from Ranken and getting a job in the industry of software development. Um, if we could just, if you don't mind, kind of introducing yourself and your journey into this industry.
All right, yeah, I'm Brian Nelson. I started with my company straight out of uh, Rankin, did the 2-year program there. I don't know if you guys have longer than 2-year program anymore,
Still
or
two
if
years, yeah.
okay. Um, yeah, and I've been with the same company ever since, so it's been almost 8 years. Oh no, just over 8 years, May 19th. So yeah, just right after graduation, I think it was like 2 weeks. Started as I think it was called a software associate back then and worked my way up. The company did like a restructuring to kind of meet with the industry. So the titles and everything got rearranged to match what most companies are doing. So um, got switched over to a software developer two, and then got promoted to a software developer three just a couple of years ago. I'm working on being a software engineer now. And yeah, that's pretty much everything.
That's awesome. So current title is software developer three, and you're working towards the title of software engineer. And what is the name of the company you've worked for these 8 years?
Oh, I work for National Information Solutions Cooperative,
Okay.
NISC for short. We write software for electrical co-ops.
And what is an electrical co-op?
Electrical co-op, around here we have electrical co-ops like River Electric. Sorry, my headset's about to die, so I had to plug it in. Um, we don't actually write software for them, but think of like Ameren, but for really rural areas.
Okay.
So they actually do the power delivery to customers who are, miles apart potentially. And they need some high class software to do analysis on their grid and management stuff too, as well as billing. And my company supports that, the software end of all those things.
And so have you been involved in all those different areas, billing? In other words, you've written probably a lot of various software in 8 years. What kind of projects have you been on?
Um, for the most part, um, I've worked on teams that do the meter data side. So um, we have our cloud infrastructure, and we have, I think at one point it was 2 billion meter readings coming into our system a day.
Two
And
billion.
so
Wow.
crunching that big data for analytics purposes. Um, None of the billing side, none of the mailing or any of that. We do have a lot of other like customer management software and like outage systems and things like that, but mostly just the cloud. I actually work on, I don't know if it would be a stretch to say, but I would be the lead engineer for a project called Operations Analytics. And so it's trying to crunch numbers in the cloud and provide data to the members working in the field and the engineers that are designing systems or the electrical grid in the field and stuff like that. So that's primarily what I've been doing for the last 8 years is operations analytics stuff. Um,
Man, I must be some kind of geek because when I hear that, I'm just so happy for you and like that's awesome, man. That is so cool.
yeah, thanks. I really like um, the analytical side of the big data space.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So, what languages do you primarily use on the job?
at NISC, we're primarily a Java shop. So we use Java and most of the direction that we're going now is the I can't give you too much about our infrastructure, the kind of Netflix style of microservices.
Okay.
Netflix has a lot of open source software, and they also give a lot of like open source discussions and conferences and
Yeah.
stuff like that. They air to the public. So um, we're like we really like their infrastructure, so we're targeting something like that. Recently, I've written things, Java. I have two personal projects at work that I'm writing in Golang.
Yep.
We have a couple of Python projects. One that I don't personally work on is written in C++ and C Sharp. Um, on a day-to-day, I use uh, X language and SQL, and pretty much whatever is needed to get the job done, like Bash, shell scripting, or if we're on like a Windows machine, then like PowerShell or Batch. So yeah, it's kind of a
Diverse skill set.
yeah.
Very diverse skill set. Well, cool. And you got a job right at a Rankin, you mentioned, within a matter of a week or two. What did you do to kind of set yourself up for that success?
So I worked at Rankin over the summer between the 2 years. So I had a lot of free time in the dorms, and I spent that time, most of that time, working on an Android app, teaching myself how to. I had the entire Android. Oh, I think it was like Froyo or something, or Bumblebee or one of those, all printed out in this big file.
Like the documentation.
Binder, yeah, for the entire development documentation. And it had like the first few chapters were just an intro, and then it gets into um, all the specific like Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, how to manage your visuals, screen rotation, things like that, and just worked my way through it bit by bit. I wrote an app, put it on the Play Store. Um, it's actually been causing me problems now because my developer account and my personal Google account have the same email, and so um, so having some issues with Google there. But um, yeah, it was a cool app, and I carried it around on my smartphone and showed it off in interviews, and that's actually like it gives a wow factor when you have something tangible that
Uh
you
huh.
made
Uh huh.
for your purposes
Uh
to
huh.
solve a real world problem,
Yeah.
and you can show that to an employer or potential employer
Yeah.
and say, hey, like I worked for this for no one else but my own personal goals. And
Yeah, because back then we didn't have any mobile application in the curriculum, right? This was just something you did outside of school.
right, yeah, I think we had like Java, C Sharp, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, a SQL, and a couple other languages. But yeah, we didn't have any specifically um, application platform targets.
Yeah. 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 No, I mean, I remember it very well as we had an employer show up. NISC showed up to an employer breakfast, and the guy at the time says, "Hey, we got a mobile app. We're looking for someone that can, work for our team and has an interest in working on mobile apps." And I don't even think I was at the employer breakfast. If you remember Mr. Duchinsky, I believe it was Mr. Duchinsky, and he goes, "Oh, we got the guy," and he went right to you, and you made your impression like that day. It was like a Friday morning, and I think that you set that in motion by doing that project, and that made it real easy for any instructor to refer you for a job, especially when an employer says, "Hey, this is what we're looking for." We could just line that right up.
Yeah, and it's funny. I didn't actually go into the mobile development at all. They found uh, a better suited team that needed. more developers,
Yeah.
a growing team. I think at the time it was like 20, but then 2 years in, it was like 26
How many
people.
developers are at NISC? Would you estimate?
Developers, um, near 1,000, I think.
Wow. You're
I
next.
mean, we're a software company, so like
Yeah.
pretty much everything revolves around software. I don't know our total employee count. I think a few years ago we were at like the 1,600 employees
Okay.
mark.
Okay.
So kind of just roughly estimating like two-thirds of that being development.
Nice. Nice. And are you all work from home 100% now? I mean, obviously you're at home, so what's the deal there?
Um, we're on a weird yes, but we have a requirement of being in the office 1 day a week, which is Wednesdays.
Okay.
For me and my team. Some teams do 2 days a week. Um, but we also, through the COVID and everything, we hired people that were fully remote, and so they're not held to the same standard. We're not going to make them move
Yeah.
just so they can come into the office.
Yeah.
Um, so
Makes
that
sense.
actually has its own set of challenges.
I imagine. So, walk us through a day in your life, from, say you're working from home. What time do you start work? When do you roll out of bed? How many hours do you work? And of the hours that you work, how many are spent writing code? This kind of stuff.
Um, so I usually get up between like 8 and 8:30 um, on work from home days and start working 9. I get about 30 minutes of development time, catching up on yesterday's stuff, discussions before I have a stand up. So we follow the agile scrum paradigm. So we do a 15-minute stand up every morning. And so that's with me, my team lead, and all of my teammates. Um, I have an hour and a half set aside for pull request reviews. And after that, typically I get a couple hours of development time, syncing up with some of the developers that I'm mentoring currently. Um, Lunch, and then after lunch, typically lunch is like 12 to 1, 1 to 2, something like that. After lunch, on some days there are infrastructure meetings, so trying to catch up on anything that's critical that we need to do with servers or um, resources in the cloud, things like that. How to manage them, how to better use them, um, and then maybe follow up some syncing up with my team lead, and then back to development for the rest of the day. Uh, I really only put in 40 hours a week. Sometimes I go over. Uh, there's not a lot of people that want you to go over your 40 because there's a thing that we really worry about in the industry called burnout.
Yeah.
And if you get somebody working 50 hours a week, how many weeks can they do that before they get sick and tired of it and just need like to take a break and
Yeah.
go look for, I don't know, some less daunting career. So that, I'd say probably half of my time is development time. So that's me actually just writing code or engineering. I keep a dry erase board close at all times for sketching out design ideas or new architectures that we're going to have to start implementing soon, things like that.
Nice. Very cool.
I think I covered all your questions there.
I think so. I think so. What tips would you give to a Ranken student in the studying development um, to be successful at Ranken?
Be there by 8, so on time to class every day. Um,
Good tip. Good tip.
there's a lot of self-drive that you need at Rankin. Um, like in the classroom setting, you do have some instructions to follow, but whenever I was at Ranken, there was a lot of things to learn, right? And we had a class. I think it started with like 16 people, maybe it was like 12 people. Um, and so I mean that's a lot of different students, a lot of different questions happening, one instructor. And so I think you have to have a lot of self-drive to learn things on your own, figure it out on your own. There's always people that you can ask questions to, but at the end of the day, that's a shared resource. And so if you can figure it out on your own, you're going to be better off anyway doing it that way because you're learning, you're figuring things out, and you're defining at that point how you're going to be as a developer too. When you get in the real world, you're not going to go ask your boss, "Hey, how do I write this like for loop the best way I can?" or like, "What's this code and how does it work?" It's stuff that you just have to learn. And so being self-driven, definitely number one. Um, yeah, I guess that's probably the defining factor between um, the people that continued with the program and the people that maybe got overwhelmed or decided that wasn't necessarily the best career path.
Yeah, yeah, I like that answer. Um, so let's say you graduate from Rankin, and you might have already touched on this about being self-driven and building software outside of school. Are there any other tips that you would offer to get your foot in the door with your first job, your first career?
So there are things called like program reviews, part of interviews. Those would I would like a developer like myself would sit in on those, have you write programs and or solve a problem. Sorry, it can be in any language, whatever you want to bring to the table. So just be confident in at least just one language. So if I ask you to come in and write this application, you can do it in Python and C, C++, um, JavaScript, if it was like a Node or Java, you can pick whatever you want. I'm supposed to be able to read basically any language at this point. So, but my job is to make sure that A, you know how to write code, but B, you know how to solve problems. So that's the difference between like being a coder and a programmer. You have coders, they can write code, it could be HTML, it could be JavaScript, but they're just tackling like little problems. As a programmer, you're trying to target a problem and break it down into individual components and kind of solve all that as a whole. So have at least one language that you're really confident in that if given just an immediate problem, hey, I need you to write something to fix this now, and you have like an hour to do it. I think there's an hour and then there's two different programming um, tasks that you do in our interview process. But yeah, be confident so that you can write something. It doesn't have to be perfect, but being able to understand and break down the process or the problem and being able to walk through that process and say, this is a logical issue that we're having, and logically it's broken into these components and target them independently. That's such a wild concept, but it's how I think whenever I'm watching somebody go through this process. That's what I'm hoping they're doing
Yeah.
is just breaking it down in their head and being able to put that in code somewhat quickly.
How long have you been interviewing developers during the hiring process for NISC?
Um, so I would say like 3 or 4 years ago, I started, and about 2 years ago, it became a little much with the we were working on migrating to some pretty dramatically different architectures, and me being the lead of the project, a lot of my time was just dedicated there. So doing interviews on top of everything was like I need that extra hour or two a week.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did it for probably about a year and a half, 2 years, I think.
What I've seen um, a lot of different salary expectations for students kind of coming out of Rankin. And one thing that I would say that I've seen um, hurt some students is they say, "Oh, I'm not taking a job unless I'm making six figures coming out the gates." In other words, their expectations are too high. Um, so I've seen where the high expectations have hindered uh, the opportunities that they have because they. On the other hand, I haven't really seen because you would probably vouch for this that it's the experience. If your ultimate goal is a high salary, the real world experience is going to get you that high salary if you're good at what you do. Um,
Yeah.
so with that in mind, what kind of salary expectations do you see out there in the industry? Not necessarily at your company, but kind of what's a good or average kind of starting salary that you might expect or hope for out of a 2 year program, or really for anybody?
Yeah, so I was friends with a lot of the people in my class, and so once we all graduated, there was a lot of us that actually had jobs out of the gate. Um, I think trying to average that somewhere between like 35 and 50 would probably be what I saw.
In 2014.
Uh, yeah, in 2014. So whatever inflation scales with that.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, the thing to note is, yeah, experience. It doesn't matter if you're making, you know, $15 an hour, um, which most programming jobs aren't hourly, but yeah, that doesn't matter because at the end of the day, you need the experience. Um, once you get out of Rankin, you don't have a PhD in computer science. You're not a resource just yet. Uh, at that point in time, a company has to say, I'm going to dedicate time to get them up to par with the industry and hope they stick around with us. So there are a lot of different companies and different approaches in mentoring and bringing somebody on straight out of college. We actually hire, I would say, mostly straight out of college. And so I see a lot of the churn of bringing somebody in, and it could be 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. Um, we actually have quite a few ranges of people coming in, and yeah, if you can be a resource coming straight out of college, any decent company is gonna recognize that. If you come in and on day one you're ready to go and you're reading the code that exists, you're writing new code, you're unit testing and doing all what you're supposed to be doing, and you are a valid resource at that point, companies will identify that and they'll adjust your salary, you know, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Especially if you bring it up, like, hey, I don't think I'm entry level, but I'm here, and so that's the important part. You need to get your foot in the door, you need to be there, and then do your best.
Yeah.
And if your best is worth more to the company, they'll identify that.
Yeah.
Or at least you could bring it up and have a conversation. What do I need to do to earn more money?
Yeah.
And that's definitely that's been my experience. You get in there, and I was just happy to have a job, honestly. Um, and I'm competing with these guys that have um, bachelor's or master's degrees. Right now, I'm actually competing with I wouldn't say competing, working to um, working with people that have like PhDs and stuff like that, and working to stay on their level and exceed expectations.
Sure.
So
Sure.
yeah, you just have to, no matter what you're up against, you have to just make sure you're ready to go, or you're ready to learn and move on from there. But yeah, get your foot in the door for sure.
I think I know the answer to my next question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. You've had this career for 8 years, and you've gone up the corporate ladder, right? And so, nice and successful career, 8 years out of school. Do you see yourself doing this forever, or do you see yourself at one point maybe changing industries? Maybe 20, 30 years down the road, you know?
Uh, Definitely not changing industries for sure.
Yeah.
My my company has a couple of different ladders that you can climb. There's like the development ladder, which is the one I'm on now. You have the management ladder, and then there's some other ones, product and such. Um, my my niche is programming. That's what I'm really good at. That's what I enjoy doing. Um, Sorry, I shouldn't say programming. Like engineering, architecting things, solving problems. And so, yeah, I foresee that I will probably be on this path until I retire.
Yeah.
And so, and the ladder is tall. Like you don't have to switch industries. You don't have to worry about getting into development or programming and thinking that there's a cap at the top where you're going to hit some point and you're not going to make any more money, or you're going to be dissatisfied with it, or if your company hits that point, you're worth much more to any other company. I can guarantee it.
Yeah.
You can go to Amazon or Google or whatever and say, "Hey, my company's not like letting me go any higher, but I want to be better. I want to be um, uh, higher in the industry,"
Yeah.
and they'll always see that as a good thing.
I
It might
like
not
how
be
you
one of the
said
big
that.
three, but
The ladder is tall. Like, what we're talking about here is like an infinite ladder. I mean, your skills and your growth in this industry can grow forever. And if you really stop and think about it, you know, as tall as we can climb any ladder as an individual, it's probably, 1/10 of what's really out there. Point is the ladder. Yeah, I like the way you said it.
yeah. I mean, I know what the highest position is on the development ladder in my company,
Right.
but I don't know what they get paid. And I know for a fact that other companies, if you get to the top of our ladder, you're good anywhere.
Yeah.
You could probably go work for anybody.
Yeah.
And uh, Google and Apple and Amazon, GoDaddy, like these big companies, they have a very high spending cap. So
Yeah.
if you're concerned about hitting the top of your ladder, then somebody else has a bigger ladder.
Well, right, and there's the because this question started off around salary, and you could phrase it around salary, but also just about your skills is kind of what we're also saying here, right? It's the skills ladder goes in hand with the salary ladder in a lot of ways. Um, Man, we covered all my questions. You know, you are an awesome interviewee. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks. No problem. I look forward to seeing people come out of Rankin, and I want to be like amazed by the passion of somebody. Like, if you can send me developers, or send my company developers that don't have a passion for the industry and show devotion to like learning new things and solving problems, then I think they'll be a great fit for not just my company, but for the industry as a whole. Like there's not enough developers
No,
right
for
now.
sure.
So
And thank you for that. I will, and I have in the past. NISC has hired, a small number of Rankin graduates, but we can definitely work on making that more. And thank you, yeah, thank you for that. And I can definitely do that. And what I didn't really hit on, and one question I should have talked about, is the culture at NISC and why you might want to go work for them. And I've brought classes out, as you know. I've brought Rankin classes to your corporate office, and it's always like a jaw dropping tour. All my students are amazed at the culture and the environment and the buildings and the location and the swimming pools or whatever. I think there's a volleyball court.
unfortunately, we swapped out the volleyball court. We needed more parking because we hired so many people, there wasn't enough space. spots to park, so
Well,
we don't have
if
one of
that's bound
those
to happen,
anymore.
that's a good reason to do it.
Yeah. No, I mean we do have a lot of cool things. The culture at NIC is something that I wouldn't trade. I think that's worth a lot. So even if, and I'm not saying this is the case, but even if I was underpaid versus like somebody wanted to offer me like 10 grand more at some other company, that's probably not worth it. I don't want to
Right.
go to like Google to make a little extra money, but then be, mandatory 55 hours a week. And um, I guess at the end of the day, I never had anybody barking at me. Yeah, I don't. The way our system's set up is I never have to like take orders, right? Everything's a conversation. There are things that I need to do and they're critical, but um, deadlines are somewhat flexible. We do the best we can to cater to our members, get fixes out and stuff as fast as possible. Um, but you know, we have we have people. You know, they're people that work with um, at NISC. They're not just cogs in a wheel.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
so there's a lot of respect that goes around. And the people that I work with closely, the other developers that I've worked with, somewhat the same group for the past 8 years. And I would say there's kind of a bond there that maybe not all of them are friends, but um, like we can BS and just talk about stuff over the weekend and stuff. It's not all work. So, and
Yeah.
you probably have that everywhere, but my team lead, my boss gets in on it, and like, we can have 20-minute offshoot conversations, not get anything done, and then we go back to work. Like it's a really nice environment to work. If you think you have the skill set and you want to give us a go, you want the non, I guess I call it like non-corporate
Yeah.
workplace.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think we'd be a good fit.
Hey, thanks so much, Brian. Let me
Yeah.
sign us off here. Thank you. Thank you.